What's up, everybody? Okay, we are live. We are into the exam breakdown, and today what we're going to be working on is real estate examination content. Stuff for your brokerage examination for real estate brokers and stuff for your real estate salesperson's licensing examination. This topic will apply everywhere, all over the United States, every state. This stuff is going to be on there, and we're going to be going into it. The topic today that we're going to be covering is agency. Welcome and welcome and welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is D. Kumar. It is a pleasure to be here and serve you. I look forward to training and teaching folks. I have been doing this for many, many years. Thank you all very much for those that have been subscribing and checking out our content. Smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't. We really our dedicated sort of goal here is to help folks learn about real estate, and for this particular segment, take your examination and pass it. So the goal here is to help you study, help you get through the real estate examination, and get you to pass so you can move on and get this license and start working and making some money for the family and doing what you got to do, the point why you're getting this license in the first place. And because I've trained tens upon tens of thousands of folks over the years, it is an absolute privilege to be able to help gamify this a bit and help give you a durable advantage to get through the examination. So many students come to me over the years and they're like, "Hey D, I'm having trouble with this and this and that." And so thank you very much. With your support with the channel, and we've been growing and it's been awesome. And we've been helping a lot of people. Check out the comments, and we're helping folks all over the place get their license. And it's a privilege to be able to do that. It's an honor. So we look forward to it. If you guys have specific things that you'd like us to teach, then please go ahead and leave those in the comments. We do follow stuff. We do kind of come up with content that students are looking for in a strategic way, of course, to make sure that everything is going well. Okay? So without further ado, what I want to get into today is a topic called agency. It's a very rudimentary topic. It's in every single real estate book all over the place. And what I would do is I would start looking at these particular items as they're going to certainly come up. Now, for the salesperson's examination, many times they go to the rudimentary elements of what agency is. And then on the brokerage examinations, what they really do is they go for sort of scenario-based questions. And with those scenario-based questions, you want to make sure that you're sort of understanding how to apply these particular items to scenario-based items. Sort of like the broker is running the show and the salesperson does this or this happens, what do we do? So you want to start sort of brushing up on those exam questions. The goal for today is about 45 minutes, and we're going to learn about agency first. We'll learn about a couple of the topics. We'll cover the items. Then we're going to go into some vocabulary, some flashcards, and go through some of the classic agency-style vocab phrases. We'll go through there. I'll give you some of my advice on what to think about here, and then we'll end the session with some questions, about 5 or so, to kind of get you primed and organized your mind thoughts into what agency is and sort of how it may apply on exams. Again, this is from the exam preparation aspect. I'm not representing you guys as an instructor or anything like that. None of this stuff is good for hours of education and completion, but I've taken this exam. I know what's on there, and I'm going to try to guide you there. Now, I don't know the exact exam that y'all are going to take, but I can make a lot of really accurate suppositions, and that's what I'm really good at. That's why a lot of folks come to me. Big corporations come to me. And we do a lot of coaching when it comes down to the bigger organizations. We go in there privately many times, and we coach their folks on how to pass. So that's what I'm going to do for you, and I'm going to do it right here and now. Let's get into this. Let's get into something called agency. I'm just going to get my slides all set up. And if you have questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment. I might actually get back to you later in the day if you have particular questions. So, all right, let me get these going. Let me get my picture-in-picture, and then let's get this going. All right, here we go. I'm flying solo, by the way, so this is all me kind of doing the stream and pushing stuff out and everything else. So bear with me. There could be some technical difficulties. They happen. We're streaming to multiple channels right now, and anything can happen. Last week, we had a couple of things that go down. Now, the real estate breakdown, the exam breakdown series that we're doing, on Mondays, we're going to be doing stuff for the real estate professionals, the salespersons, the brokers, the future licensees there. On Wednesdays, we are doing mortgage licensing or loan originator exam prep for NMLS, the Nationwide Mortgage Licensing System, and that's going to be on Wednesdays. So we're going to try to go live and give you a little bit of information every week, and we're going to kind of cover the real estate folks on Mondays, and we're going to cover the mortgage folks on Wednesdays, and then you can always check the live stream later. It's always going to be posted, and you guys can always revisit that and follow that. We'd love to have you join us live. That's always awesome and fun. The the experience is good if we can get that interaction. And if not, no big deal. We'll post this later and y'all can do this when you are free. All right. So with agency, let's do this. First off, you want to know what agency is. And basically, agency is the relationships between the licensee and the various parties. Now, those various parties are known as clients and customers in transactions. The transaction can have multiple, two clients, client on the buy side, a client on the sell side. It could be a client on the tenant side. It could be a client on the landlord side, or both. So many states offer different types of these agency relationships. But the fundamental here is that agency relationships are between a real estate professional and their client. And there are ways that we treat the customer, okay? Where the agent acts in the client's best interest. So when we're talking about the client's best interest, well, who is the client? First off, the client is also referred to as the principal on real estate examinations. So I want you to know that the word client and the word principal can be used interchangeably on exam questions. And they'll do that. They'll twist it around many times. Many times writers try to get sneaky and they'll still call them the principal. They might call them the client. The customer is a definite different party. It's the other party that we owe certain things to, but we owe the best interest to act in the best interest of the client in agency relationships. Now, we call that acting in the client's best interest. A fancy word for that is something called fiduciary responsibilities. I'm just going to write fiduciary relationship. Now, that's really what we owe them, this thing. And we're going to break that down in just a few moments. Now, how is an agency relationship established? Classic question. There are two ways we can establish an agency relationship. One way is through express written agreement. We can be hired with formal paperwork. And another way we can do it is through implied action. Sort of actions, I do something, you do something. I do something, you do something. And with that, we can establish a relationship in that format. Well, we can establish a contract in that way under certain conditions. For example, I could pay my landscaper, leave a check for them on the door. I could never meet them. I just say, hey, look, they say, hey, I'm going to cut your grass. I don't say no. They're cutting my grass. They leave a bill. I put a check where they left the bill, and we just go back and forth. They come every week. They cut my grass. I never get to talk to them. I never meet them. It's actually kind of close to the truth. And that's how this goes. Do we have a contract? Sure, absolutely. We've established some sort of a contractual obligation, and when they cut my grass and I refuse to pay, then we might have a grievance, but we have a contract, okay? All right, so let's go into this a little bit further, and we'll go from there. So let's keep going. How do this agency relationship is established? And it's established that way. Oh, I actually jumped to the wrong slide. Me bad. Sometimes my software acts funny, so sometimes I have to do this. All right, so let's talk about the agency relationships and sort of how they're established. First off, hang on. Here we go. All right, so we were talking earlier about how we establish these agency relationships. And the first way we can do it is through express agreement. Express agreement. This is the clearest way that we can start a relationship. It can be written or verbal, and it outlines the terms explicitly. So an example of an express agreement would be a listing agreement. Okay, so a listing agreement is an example of an express agreement. It happens to be in writing. An implied agreement, with the example that I gave you about my landscaper, occurs through actions, such as an agent showing loyalty by assisting a client informally. In the real estate practice, it could be, hey, I'm going to show you your apartment, and I show your apartment a bunch of times, and if somebody rents it, will you pay me a commission? And the landlord says, sure, I'll pay you a commission. So we have this implied agency relationship that's also happening. Obviously, the best way to create an agency relationship is through express agreement, right? That's the best way. But we can also create these implied agreements as well. So you want to know express versus implied. Now, in the world of the types of agency relationships, what we have is we have something called a general agent or general agency, and then we have something called special or limited agency. Now, these are definitely things you see on exams. And general agents are hired to handle ongoing tasks. A classic example of a general agent. There are two I will give you. Number one, a salesperson is considered a general agent. They're an agent that works under a special agent. The special agent I want you to know for your examination is a broker. Broker is a special agent hired to perform a single specific task. Sell my house, rent my rental unit, find me a house, find me a place to rent. These are all specific, single, specific tasks. And we call those that we hire a special agent. Now, you might go, hey, I found an apartment through a salesperson. They were working for a broker. Well, that's true, but the broker was hired, and then the broker delves out the authority to their general agents, the salespersons, to be able to do it. Remember, a salesperson cannot practice without being affiliated across the United States. They have to be affiliated with the broker. So, and if you want to practice as a salesperson, you have to be affiliated with the broker. There's no way to independently operate with just a salesperson's license. That's on your real estate exam, I'm pretty sure. All right, so brokers are special agents. Salespersons are general agent. Another example of a general agent would be a property manager. So a property manager is also a general agent. I'm just looking over my shoulder, making sure everything's looking good. All right, so that is what is a special and general agent. The next thing let's talk about common agency relationships. And these are very standard so that we can kind of take a peek at these and understand. You're definitely going to need to know how to break these open a little bit. Like common agency relations that we have here is we have buyer's agents, seller's agents, and dual agents. And you want to understand basically how each one of these kind of looks and works. These are pretty simple. These two are very sort of like binary, right? Like we've got a client on one side, and we've got a customer. Pardon my terrible art, but it is what it is. All right, so we have agent, right? Now, when we're talking about agent, obviously you guys know, and I'm going to just change this color. Let me just get red. This is probably a little bit better. So the hierarchy here is broker, and then underneath every broker is a salesperson. Okay. Remember, the broker is the special agent. I'll write SP here, and then the salesperson is the general agent. I'll write G. That's a G right there. My penmanship's really crummy. All right. So in a buyer's agency scenario, in this agency relationship, the client is the buyer. Making on the other side, because we call these single agency relationships. This is also single agency. Single agency means there is one client or one client group and one customer or one customer group. So like one side versus the other kind of thing, right? Client and the other side is customer. And in buyer's agency, the customer is the seller. All right, so we have the seller, who's the customer, or we treat them like the customer, and then the client is the buyer. And we are representing the buyer. Therefore, we owe the buyer, the client, also known as the principal, we owe them the fiduciary obligation. All right, so we owe them a fiduciary obligation. Now, for my friends all over the country, we learn fiduciary obligation in two different ways. I'm going to jump to that slide, and then we're going to come back here. We're going to fill these in. Okay, so what is a fiduciary relationship? A fiduciary relationship, or the fiduciary duties, are everything the agent does or does not do must financially benefit their principal. Everything that they do or don't do, every action that they take or don't take in a fiduciary relationship must benefit the client or the principal. And there are several of these. Absolutely, these are on examinations. You need to memorize these. One way that we can memorize them is this acronym called OLD CAR. All right, so remember, the agent must act in the best interest of the client at all times. As a matter of fact, breach of fiduciary trust is a tortious claim that somebody can allege if their agent violates any of these in some way. So obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, and reasonable care. These all make up old car or the fiduciary obligations or duties. Now, this is what's owed. The agent owes this to the client. So you want to remember that. Now, another way that you can remember the old car acronym in some books in some states that y'all are in, we learn it as cold AC. And in that case, we have care. So they have care here, care. Then obedience. Then we have the L is loyalty. Then we have disclosure. Then we have accounting. And then we have confidentiality. And so no matter which way you learn it, 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other, you want to memorize these. Now, also what you want to memorize inside of these, and this is an important one too, is you want to make sure that you understand what each of these are defined as. So go through your books and materials and sort of understand what they are. Like, what does care mean? What are we supposed to be doing? What does that simply mean? What is obedience? We have to put their interest above our interests, right? So we have to make sure that we are following that faithfully within the scope of the law, of course. If our client tells us or orders us a directive that is illegal, then we don't have to comply with that. So things like that, little bitty nuances you're going to see about these. A lot of test writers like to mess with this one. So you want to make sure that you have that under control. Okay. Loyalty is another good one. Disclosure could be paperwork, or it could be disclosing material facts and material defects. Those are also important. Accounting, we have to be accountable for all monies being held, no commingling, no conversion, that kind of stuff. And then confidentiality. We have to maintain confidentiality. Now, in some states, by the way, you should check this. In some states, sorry about that. In some states, confidentiality must be maintained forever. And in other states, confidentiality must be maintained until the transaction consummates or settles. And so double check with your state there. Every state is going to have some silly thing that's different about it compared to some other state. Generally speaking, this all flies throughout these general concepts. Okay, so just keep those in mind. All right, so that's fiduciary duties. All of this stuff we owe to the client. Now, what do we owe to the customer? Let's go back here. And to the customer, if we owe all of that stuff, the cold AC, I'll write old car. That's a D. Old car. We owe that to the client. The customer, we owe a couple of things to. All right, so we owe sort of a professionalism, reasonable care, and honesty. And again, those could be all of the following are owed to a customer, except kind of questions, those kinds of things. You want to know a little bit about those. Okay. So that's buyer's agency. In a very brief overview, again, I'm giving you just a quick rundown. Read your books, check them out, work on some practice questions here because they do come from different angles, a lot of the test writers. Now, if this works for the buyer's agent, then a seller's agent is basically the opposite here. So if we're looking at the seller's agent, we just swap these folks out. Okay, so client becomes seller, and then customer becomes buyer. And again, this is a single agency relationship, means that one side is a client, one side is a customer. We will also many times on exams and in practice refer to a seller's agent as a listing agent. Y'all want to know that, because sometimes in questions, they'll be very distinct about the listing agent being a separate person or entity at the real estate brokerage firm, separate from other people. Now, at a real estate firm, all of these different things, generally speaking, can be practiced depending on the firm. Some firms like to exclusively represent buyers. Some like landlord representation only. Some like tenant representation only. Some like sellers representation only. And then you have your companies that'll do a little bit of everything. Somebody at their office will be listing agent. Somebody in their office will be a seller's agent. Somebody in their office will be a buyer's agent. Somebody in their office will represent landlords, blah, blah, blah. They'll go from there and they'll sort of fractionalize what they're doing. So you want to understand it all depends wherever y'all work at. You want to find out what their agency relationship practices typically are, what they will allow to be practiced inside. Some firms are very specific about we only represent buyers. Some will say we will represent sellers, etc. So definitely ask. There's some kind of a hiccup here. Don't care about that. Oh, I see the reason why. All right. So the dual agency is a scenario, and you want to know this. Some states allow dual agency to be practiced. Again, agent, client. And in dual agency, both sides are treated like clients. All right, so in dual agency, there's a fiduciary obligation that's owed to both sides. Now, that is a popular one on exams because you can't give the full fiduciary trust to both sides. You can't give old car to both sides because you would be sort of competing against yourself. So instead, what they do is they limit what you have to give to both sides. So this is something that they call limited agency. And limited agency is you break it down to the first three are what you avoid. Care, obedience, and loyalty, you don't owe to either side, but disclosure, accounting, and confidentiality, you can give to both sides. You can maintain confidentiality. You can be accountable for all the monies being held and moved back and forth. And you can disclose material facts, material defects about the asset, about the property. So those can all be played. And as a matter of fact, this is popular on exams. So I would look out for something like this, a test question, practice. You'll see them. I know we have a bunch of these styles on our channel. So just as you're sorting through our questions, we have a ton of questions. You should be good to go. Okay. So that's a little bit more about the dual agency. Now, a couple of other things here, and then I want to get into some of the flashcards, is types of listing agreements. So in our business, definitely, you are going to see that we have all kinds of different listing agreements. I'm just going to kind of organize that a little bit better. And these listing agreements are where we're representing the seller, and you definitely need to know the definitions of these. Exclusive right to sell. You want to know the difference between this and an exclusive agency, the definition of an open listing, and the definition of a net listing. Now, I'm going to circle this one. Every real estate exam makes a reference or some answer to a net listing. It's on every single one of them. It's going to be on yours. It's going to be on, you have younger generations taking the real estate exam. Generations from now, it'll be on their test as well. So net listing is a very popular thing. So let's sort of do this from the back. The net listing first is agents keep anything over the set sales price. So net listings in many states are illegal or prohibited. And that's one of the reasons why you see them. So these are not allowed. And the reason why is it could adversely impact valuation in areas because the motivation is not in alignment with the fiduciary obligation. So a seller might come to me and says, look, D, all I want to make is $2 million. Anything you can sell this place for above $2 million, you can keep. So I sell the asset for $2.5 million in a really hot real estate market. It's interesting, right? In certain markets, it's what two parties perceive, and it's a certain sort of a socioeconomic and financial ability and capacities. You'll see that in some areas, look, a building to two really rich buyers and sellers, they could say slap a price on it, and it's to whatever the buyer wants to buy it for. Really, it has less often to do with market dynamics, right? It's more to do with just buyer and seller, which is true for market dynamics. I guess you can argue, right? But the reality is, in some areas you can say, hey, I've got something that's worth 2, 3, 4, 5. It depends. I don't even know. And it's not based off of any actual number or anything like that you typically see. All right. So what you end up finding out is that the net listing can severely impact valuations in an area. and therefore they prohibit them. Now, the exclusive right to sell and the exclusive agency, you want to know the difference between these two. And then we have something called an open listing. Open listings, the seller can work with multiple agents. Whoever can first come, first serve. Whoever can rent my unit first will get the commission. That's sort of how an open listing works. Many times in areas that do a lot of rentals and get commissions for those, you'll see rental agents and landlords work with the open listing capacity. Right? You'll also see many times that the landlords will also work exclusively. And now the agents, from the agent's perspective, they want one of the two of these. They want to be exclusive no matter what, but they want to either be exclusive, including the seller, which is the exclusive right to sell. Agents get commission regardless of who finds the buyer, including the seller themselves. And in the exclusive agency, commissions only if the agent finds the buyer, but the seller can sell and find their own buyer. Obviously, every agent wants the first one. And usually when they go to a listing agreement, the second contract isn't even there. It's not even an option. But for some of you sellers out there that are looking at buying and selling and et cetera, you want to make sure that you find out. Maybe you know buyers that want to buy an asset, and agents might try to throw rocks at me because of this. But the reality is that people just show up with the exclusive right to sell. They don't even think that there's something else, and there's always something else. Everything, 100% of everything here that we're learning in the business is negotiable. Commissions included, by the way. All right, so those are your different types of listing contracts. Look out for those. What else do we have here? I want to also just point out that when we're dealing with other brokerage relationships, there is this other non-agency relationship called a facilitator. And in some states, y'all call them transaction brokers. Facilitators and transaction brokers are basically where there is no specific client representation. So there is no client. Both sides are customers. And the agent is representing the transaction, not the sides. So there's no fiduciary obligation. However, there are some very limited things that you owe as a facilitator. You still owe disclosure and you still owe accounting. So these are two fiduciary obligations that are still required of a facilitator. Now, many times you'll see agencies act as facilitators on larger scale transactions. If some large multinational company or international company they have their own real estate team. They don't need a brokerage firm to negotiate on their behalf. They need to understand the customs and practices of the area, but beyond that, they don't really need to know much more than that. And so, and you might be dealing with a huge, real estate investment trust that has a large portfolio of properties that deal in those spaces. And so they have their professionals. Facilitators are kind of bringing parties together, and they get compensated for such. But they only owe both sides the treatment of customers. Okay? So we talked about the customer relationship. We talked about fiduciary obligation. We talked about the different elements here. The thing I also want to talk about is terminating these relationships. So how do we terminate agency style relationships? And they're fairly easy to terminate. Number one, it could just simply expire. The listing is over at the end of the summer. If you can't sell my house, then the listing contract expires. The best way that we can expire or terminate a contract is the fulfillment of this contract. The deal closes. Everybody gets paid. Everybody goes on their own way. Mutual agreement. Hey, agent, this isn't working out for me. Agent says, I agree. This isn't working out for me either. Let's terminate. Let's agree to disagree, right? That's mutual agreement. Breach of contract. Breach is a violation. And so the seller could sue the agency for breach of contract, or lack of fiduciary trust, these types of things. Breach is where somebody violates in a contractual obligation, and there are certain remedies. There could be money damages, there could be just termination of the agreement, and so on. Now, also, death or incapacity of the principal or the principal broker. In many instances, in many instances terminate unless a specific language to the contrary would they allow that to happen. So the death of the seller of the property would terminate the listing agreement. Now, the estate can hire the firm and continue on, but the death or incapacity of the principal would also be grounds for termination of an agency. And now they love to put termination questions equally on this. They could be all of the following would terminate a listing agreement except kind of a question. So look out for those as well. All right. That, my friends, was a quick roundup on what agency is. A couple of the things that I would look out for as you're preparing for your exam. Hopefully this clears up some of the questions that you might have. Now let's take a short break, and when we come back, let's get into some vocab. We'll go through some vocab phrases, then we'll hit some quiz questions, and we will be back to our lives. I'll see you in a few moments. All right, we are back. This next segment in our exam breakdown for agency today is going to go through some vocab phrases. So let's go into some vocab. Let's check out some of these phrases. I'll jump in where I think it's appropriate and maybe add in a little bit more beyond the slide. But these are just phrases that I would start to notate. So maybe you just want to jot the phrase down, agency relationship, for example, that's coming up first, and then kind of get an idea. So go, okay, Dee just went through a couple of vocab phrases. Let me just make sure I understand what these particular ones are, and we should be good. All right? All right, let's hit this. First one is agency relationship. A legal relationship created when one party, the agent, is authorized to act on behalf of another, the principal or client, in a real estate transaction. Remember, they call this the agency relationship, and that's just important to remember. Client. The client is the party who has formally engaged the services of a real estate licensee, establishing an agency relationship where the agent owes them fiduciary duties. This is also called the principal. Customer. Customers are someone that receives basic assistance and information from a real estate agent but does not have an agency relationship established with them. For example, a buyer would be the customer of a listing agent in a sales transaction because the agent is representing the seller. Remember, these are all called single agency relationships when we have a client and a customer. Express agreement. A clear, explicit agreement between parties, either written or verbal, that establishes mutual understanding and authorization for a specific action or relationship. Fiduciary duties. A real estate agent must always prioritize the principal's best interest above all else, including their own personal interest. This obligation includes fulfilling fiduciary duties such as following lawful instructions, which is obedience, remember, lawful instructions, acting with loyalty, providing full and honest information in terms of disclosure, protecting clients' confidentiality, handling funds responsibly in terms of accounting, and exercising professional skill and care, which is known as reasonable care. Fiduciary obligations are definitely tested on exams. General agency. A principal, such as a property owner, hires an agent to handle ongoing tasks and responsibilities related to specific business operations. For example, a property manager may be hired to manage and maintain a building continuously. Special agency. This occurs when a real estate agent is hired to perform a single specific duty on behalf of a client. Typically, this duty involves finding a buyer, seller, or renter for a property, and the agent's authority is limited to this particular task. Special agency relationships are the most common. Implied agency. An agency relationship created by the actions or the behaviors of the parties rather than a written or verbal agreement. Dual agency. When a single agent represents both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction, requiring disclosure and consent from both parties. By the way, that is a classic potential question that we have to give written approval or written assent. Both sides must give consent to this dual agency practice. Facilitator. A real estate professional who provides administrative support and ensures that the transaction process follows a legal and procedural guidelines, but they do not represent or advocate for any party. They remain completely neutral, focusing on tasks such as preparing documents, delivering disclosures, and coordinating communication between buyers and sellers. Exclusive right to sell agreement. A listing agreement where the agent earns a commission regardless of who finds the buyer. Exclusive agency agreement. It's a listing agreement where the agent earns a commission only if they procure the buyer. The seller retains the right to sell independently, and that is the underlying fact. Open listing. A non-exclusive agreement allowing multiple agents to market a property, with commissions paid only to the agent who finds the buyer. Net listing. A listing agreement where the agent keeps any amount above a specific sales price as commissions, often prohibited due to ethical concerns. Listing agreement. A written contract between a seller and a real estate broker that authorizes the broker to market the property and negotiate on the seller's behalf. Power of attorney. A POA is a legal document that gives one person the authority to act on behalf of another in specific matters, such as signing contracts or closing transactions. Agent duties to non-clients. Agent duties to non-clients are duties owed to customers, including honesty, fair dealings, and disclosure of known material facts about a property. Agency disclosures. The formal notification to a buyer or seller about the agent's role in the transaction, whether a representative of one party, both parties in a dual agency, or as a transactional broker. All right, that's some vocab for y'all. Take a note of those. Those are very popular. Those are the ones that typically show up on exams. And you're going to see other ones potentially, but these are good. It's a good way to get you started and understand what you need to sort of get sorted when it comes to agency. All right, let's take a very short break, and then we're going to get into some questions and wrap our session. All right, we are back. So let's go into some questions. Let's hit these, and let's get you back to your lives. Question number 1. Which of the following is not a fiduciary duty that an agent exclusively owes to their client? Letter A, loyalty. Letter B, disclosure. Letter C, honesty. Letter D, confidentiality. Which of the following is not a fiduciary duty that an agent exclusively owes to their client? Answer, letter C, honesty. All right, so honesty, remember, is what we owe to the customer, and to the client, we do not have this honesty sort of tab. It's not part of Old Car. It's not part of Cold AC. So we just want to remember that honesty is what we owe to the customer, and the rest is what we owe to the client. Question number 2. In which type of agency relationship does the agent have the broadest authority to act on behalf of the client? Letter A, special agency. Letter B, general agency. Letter C, dual agency. Letter D, non-agency. In which type of agency relationship does the agent have the broadest authority to act on behalf of the client? And the answer? Letter B, general agency. So with general agency, remember, that's broad allowances. Special agent is a specific task. Dual agency is something different. This is giving representation to both sides. And then non-agency is a facilitator. So again, these are classic style questions that they're going to approach you with. This would be a good way that the test writer would come at you with this kind of a topic. Question number 3. Which of the following scenarios would result in the termination of an agency relationship? Letter A, fulfillment of the contract's purpose. Letter B, death of the principal or agent. Letter C, mutual agreement between the agent and the principal. Letter D, all of the above. Which of the following scenarios would result in the termination of agency relationships? And the answer? Letter D, all of the above. So if we fulfill the contract's purpose, if there's death of the principal or the agent, the principal agent, or if there's a mutual agreement between the parties, all of these would terminate. So this is a classic way that a writer would want to write about the termination of agency style questions. Classic. You want to make sure you learn these or rewatch these parts when it comes to these questions. They're pretty sort of insightful when you think about what's going to be coming up. Question number 4. What is the primary difference between a client and a customer? Letter A. Clients are owed fiduciary duties while customers are generally owed only honesty and fairness. Letter B. Customers must sign an agency agreement, but clients do not. Letter C. Clients are represented by a transaction broker while customers are not. Letter D, an agent owes a wider range of fiduciary duties to a customer compared to a client. What is the primary difference between a client and a customer? And the answer? Letter A, clients are owed fiduciary duties while customers are owed only honesty and fairness. Just defining what is a client, what do we owe them, and what is a customer, what do we owe them. Very, very classic, but want to make sure that you understand this type of thing. Another way that you could do this is by reading the answers first. Always read the answers if you get an opportunity. Sometimes you can sort through the answers and you can kind of see which one makes the most sense, which is true, which is false, which is partially true, etc. And here you could go through these and go, okay, this is sort of switching the roles on what client and customer is. However, letter A is the definition, is accurately describing what's going on. And the final question, question number 5. A seller signs an open listing agreement with multiple brokers to sell their property and also retains the right to sell the property on their own. If broker A and broker B both show the property to potential buyers and broker B finds a buyer who decides to purchase the property, who is owed a commission? Letter A, broker A. Letter B, broker B. Letter C, both brokers A and B. Letter D, neither of the brokers. A seller signs an open listing agreement with multiple brokers to sell their property and also retain the rights to sell the property on their own. If broker A and broker B both show the property to potential buyers and broker B finds a buyer who decides to purchase the property, who is owed a commission? And the answer? Letter B, broker B. So in this scenario, we have an open listing. It says, signs an open listing agreement with multiple brokers. And so open listing basically means first come, first served. The party that ends up selling it gets paid. The seller in this question retained the right to also sell the asset, like you have in some scenarios with exclusive agency versus exclusive right to sell. We talked about those earlier. So you want to definitely know the definitions of all of the listing agreements. You will see them. They like to jumble them up like this. They like to give you confusion. Sometimes a student might say neither. Some students might say, just one, or maybe both should get paid. Not sure. And in this particular situation with an open listing, it's all about who procured cause, who created the chain of events that ultimately led to the deal closing. All right. Boom. There you go. A quick, succinct agency study session. We learned about some agency points. We looked at some vocab phrases, and we hit some questions. I'd say that that's a wrap. I think that that's a good way to end our session. Good luck with your studies. Good luck with your exams. If you all have questions, put them in the comments. We'll see if we can help you out. If there's specific things that you'd like to learn about, let us know. I'm always excited to do that. Honestly, thank you again for subscribing and checking out our content and letting other people know our channel is growing and growing and growing, and we owe it all to you. I look forward to our next live session. By the way, it's on Wednesday, where we're dealing with the mortgage loan originators and their NMLS licensing examination. And for some of you real estate professionals, the content that we're going over would be useful potentially to also help you out. So you might want to sit in on that session and check it out, listen to it. If not, my mortgage friends, I'll see you on Wednesday. Everybody have a great week. work hard, study hard, focus, pass these examinations, and let us know in the comments. It makes us super excited to know that we're making a difference to help you all get through this licensing exam. All right, we'll see you in the next one.